Tonight on Boston's Race into History, at long last, we have finally crossed the finish line. After a hard-fought campaign that stretched for more than a year, Michelle Wu is Boston's mayor-elect, the first woman, first person of color, and first Asian American chosen by voters to run the city. On Tuesday, the electorate backed Wu and her vision of bold systemic change over her opponent, Annissa Essaibi-George, and her more measured approach. With 64% of the vote to Essaibi-George's 36%, it is fair to say that Wu has a mandate. And in her victory speech at the Cyclorama in the South End, she doubled down on thinking big.
Today at the polls, and over this last year, and over generations in this city, Boston has come together to reshape what is possible. We are the city of the first public school in the country, the first public park, the first subway tunnel in the country. We're the city of revolution, civil rights, marriage equality. I want to be clear. It wasn't my vision on the ballot. It was ours, together. Over 10 years in City Hall and in every neighborhood, connecting with all of our residents, I've seen and experienced just how big an impact local government makes in people's lives. And I'll never stop fighting to make our systems work for all of us.
Of course, fighting to make systems work better is one thing. Changing them in a meaningful way is something quite different. Case in point, the ongoing crisis at Mass and Cass, which has shown for years that existing systems designed to address homelessness, addiction, and mental health problems aren't getting the job done. And then there is the high cost of housing, a huge wealth gap that divides Boston neighborhoods and the people who call them home, an increasingly segregated school system, and a police department many Bostonians feel isn't working in their best interest. Now, in less than 2 weeks, Wu will own those challenges and many others, and voters will be watching to see if she can make her political vision a reality. Joining me to talk through Wu's first few days as mayor-elect and the challenges that lie ahead are two of my colleagues, GBH News City Hall correspondent Saraya Wintersmith and GBH News political editor Peter Kadzis. Thank you both for being here. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Adam.
Saraya, let me start with you. Over the course of her first few days as mayor-elect, Wu was pressed by a lot of reporters, maybe including you, about changes she was going to make, hires she was going to make, how her style might be different than her predecessors. By and large, at least to my ear, she didn't take the bait. But there was one area in which she talked about doing something differently. It involved management of and response to the situation at Mass and Cass. Let's take a look.
One of the very first hires that we're looking to make is to establish a cabinet level position for clear action, leadership, and coordination across all of the various entities and agencies involved.
Saraya, the idea of a single individual running operations at Mass and Cass, it's been kicking around for a little while, right?
That's right. New position, but not a new idea. It became popular over the course of the campaign this year, and now it's emerging as a priority for the incoming Wu administration. She said it's a key hire that she would like to make. That person, of course, already had a hard job, but I think it was complicated more today by the fact that we saw the ACLU file a lawsuit about how the city is going about addressing removing people and cleaning the streets in the area. Wu has said that she is open to pursuing some changes to the strategy that's been laid out by acting Mayor Kim Janey, two of which are first, that she doesn't think people who are in line for treatment should be arrested and taken to the court that is set up there to process folks. And don't be surprised also if you hear her advocating for the court to expand its jurisdiction so that it can address warrants that come from someplace other than Boston.
In 2013, when Marty Walsh won, one of the things he did early on in his administration was hire a couple of former rivals, John Barros and Felix Arroyo, to become part of his cabinet. Is there any buzz about Wu doing something similar, whether it's for this yet to be filled Mass and Cass czar position or other roles?
That was a question that we in the press asked her after her briefing with Kim Janey. We know from Kim Janey's endorsement immediately following the preliminary election that the two of them have been in discussions about a possible place for Janey within the Wu administration. But Wu didn't offer any clues about whether or not she'll deploy a similar, broader team of rivals strategy. She's kind of sticking to her talking points about prioritizing an administration that reflects the city. And she, of course, says that she'll share when she has something to share. And that means all of us in the press are running around and snooping to see what we can find.
Peter Kadzis, we've talked a bit about Mass and Cass here. Obviously, that's going to be a high priority for the new Wu administration. Are there other areas in which you would expect her to take dramatic action quickly that could have a meaningful short-term impact?
Well, first of all, let's take her two big signature issues, rent control / rent stabilization, and making the T free. If you've been listening carefully, those issues have ceded from the foreground. That leaves as a third big issue the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is a subject that would unite her still somewhat fragile, but it's her still somewhat fragile coalition. It's something they can all rally around. Also, I wouldn't be surprised if the Boston Public Schools, in some way, shape, or form, nudge themselves onto the agenda, whether anyone wants it or not. Let's not forget, in the background, the state is still making noises about putting several Boston schools into receivership.
Okay, that's a good point. It's worth noting, you pointed this out to me, that when it comes to making the T free, for example, reinstituting rent control, she's going to be dependent on other branches of government working with her if those things are to become a reality. So they're not going to be able to be turned around quickly at all. Let me ask you about something else, Peter, specifically the national treatment of Wu's victory. Stephen Colbert, after she defeated Annissa Essayah-George, tried to play Wu's win for laughs. I think it's debatable whether he succeeded or not. Let's take a look.
There was also a big victory in New York's Milwaukee, Boston, where voters elected Michelle Wu, who will be the city's first woman and person of color to become mayor. Yes. Woo! Woo!
On a more serious note, though, your former colleague Ellen Berry sent out a tweet after Wu's win, mentioning her in the same breath as Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. Pretty heady company for the mayor-elect. Do you think that Wu's administration is going to be a subject of national interest over the course of the next 4 years?
I don't know about the next 4 years, but over the next 12 months for sure. But let's compare and contrast. We used to hear an awful lot about Kamala Harris, and maybe we'll hear more again. But right now, she appears to be on the shelf. I think Wu's national profile will depend on the rate of success she enjoys in Boston, or the rate of conflict that her proposals engender, one or the other. That's a definitely stay tuned, and Ellen Berry was right. Mayor Wu is someone the nation is going to keep their eye on, at least for a while.
Saraya Wintersmith, I want to backtrack a second. You talked about the possibility of Kim Janey finding a home in the Wu administration. Is there even the slightest of chances that Michelle Wu might find a role for Annissa Essayah-George?
You know, that's a question that wasn't answered at the election night victory press conference. We in the press corps did ask whether or not Annissa Essayah-George had given a concession call. We found out that she did, and I think it's been well documented now that Wu said she found Essayah-George incredibly gracious, and she knows that she will continue to be a leader for the city. That can certainly be interpreted as an open door, but I think you'd really need to have unfettered access to both women to see if there is genuine interest in that sort of arrangement on either side.
And I guess one thing to contemplate there is there's the question of whether Michelle Wu could bring herself to hire Annissa Essaibi-George, and whether Annissa Essaibi-George could bring herself to work in a Wu administration,
right,
since she has a different vision of the way political change works. Peter Kadzis, last question for you. Another moment in one of Wu's press avails over the past few days that made my ears prick up involved management style. She was talking about how there's not a lot of time for her administration to get up and running, and how the people who run departments in the city are going to be need to given a green light to do what they got to do. Let's take a look.
The number one priority right now is to build out the team. We are in the midst of a faster transition than ever before, and to successfully implement policy, we need to have empowered leadership within each cabinet, within each department to carry that out.
Peter Kadzis, was that something of a dig at Marty Walsh? Because my recollection is that he was known for not empowering department heads to do what they needed to do if it didn't agree with the way he wanted things to be done.
Well, it could be. I'm not so sure. I think it's more a reflection of her own philosophy. At this time in the transition, I would be expecting Mayor-elect Wu to be personally meeting with department heads and cabinet heads, informing them of what her priorities, what her agenda is. If the people she meets with find that her thinking runs counter to theirs, the logical conclusion would be for them to quietly resign or quietly move on. I think that Wu is trying to make her presence felt quietly within City Hall before she moves more aggressively.
All right, on that note, Peter Kadzis, Saraya, Wintersmith, thank you both, as always.
Hey, happy to do it.
Take care.
Boston's mayoral race got a massive amount of media attention in recent months, in large part for all the reasons we mentioned earlier. One way or another, the outcome was bound to be historic. But it was not the city's only important contest this fall. This week, Boston voters also backed a ballot question that will reduce the mayor's budgetary power while ramping up the city councils. In another ballot question, this one non-binding, they said Boston should return to an elected school committee. And they elected several new city councilors, including 2 who will fill the at-large seats vacated by Michelle Wu and Annissa Essaibi-George. Ruthzee Louijeune is an attorney and advocate and the first ever Haitian American to serve on the council. Erin Murphy is a public school teacher and single mom who has been directly affected by the opioid crisis. And both of them join me now. Good to see you two, and let me start by congratulating you on your wins. I just offered very quick, very reductive biographies of each of you. And I'm hoping that you two can flesh out a little more for voters who are viewers who aren't familiar with you. Some of them will have voted for you, but other people will be meeting you for the first time. I'd love to learn a little more about how your various or your respective lives have shaped the way you think about politics. And Ruthzee, let's start with you, and then we'll turn to Erin.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm excited to be that I was elected as an at-large city councilor across the city with such strong numbers. The reason why I care so much about the city is I was born and raised here, and Boston has given me quite a lot. I've seen where Boston has made mistakes, and I've seen where we've done things right, and I want to make sure that we can continue to do things right. I was born and raised in Mattapan and Hyde Park to Haitian immigrants, working class parents who fought like really extremely hard to create a better life for me and my 3 sisters. I'm a BPS kid. Shout out to the Taylor, the McCormick, and Boston Latin School, the schools that really nurtured me, and the nonprofits that really encouraged me to see this city as my own when I was 14 years old, starting as a walking tour guide in the South End and Lower Roxbury, and really sharing with others the richness of the city, the diversity of the city, the people-led history here in our city neighborhoods. And I'm excited to make sure that we are working neighborhood by neighborhood to build a better, more inclusive, more equitable city.
Erin Murphy, how has the life that you have led up until this point informed the way that you think about politics?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'm excited with the results from Tuesday and to be able to represent the city. And I had said during the campaign trail and still say I ran to be your city councilor for the same reason. I've been a Boston public school teacher for over 20 years. I love the city, I love the children, and I want to be part of that shared future moving forward, bringing us together. I was born and raised here in Dorchester 51 years ago. I'm a single mom who has raised my children here in the city, public school teacher, renter in the city of Boston. So a lot of my lived experiences I can connect to, and I've made strong relationships with families across this city, knowing that, I have a lot of the same struggles they have, same issues they have. If it's figuring out the Boston Public School maze for their kids, dealing with mental health and recovery issues in their family, which is something my family has struggled with, and something that I continue to be a strong advocate, right? A community advocate, born granddaughter to Irish immigrants. My grandfather started the first community center, the first neighborhood association here in the city of Boston, where he brought Dana, the Dorchester United Neighborhood Association, together. My mom and aunt started the first teen center. So I was definitely brought up in a family where giving back and community outreach and supporting others is just in my blood. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to take my experience as a school teacher, as someone who's been a strong advocate at Mass and Cass and those struggling with mental health and recovery, and all of those lived experiences, as a renter who understands that this city is expensive to live in. And I worry for my grown children, my young adult children, like, will they be able to stay here? And also knowing, campaigning across the city, I made a commitment, and I know that showed on election day, that I was going to show up in every neighborhood. I was going to campaign in every neighborhood to make sure that I showed up, I listened, and I learned. Because once elected, you're at large. You're not just representing a small district, you're representing the whole city. So that's something I know I'll continue to do now on the council.
Erin, I'm going to come back to you in a moment to ask for your thoughts on the schools and the situation at Mass and Cass. But first, Ruthzee, I know that you are, not that you are not interested in those issues, as you point out, you're a BPS kid yourself, but I know you've been very active on the housing front. You've worked with the Mass Affordable Housing Association. One of the hot topics in this campaign, as you know, what are steps that you would like to see the city take in the coming years to address the incredibly high cost of housing, which both of you have mentioned here?
Yeah, it's a major issue. I think that we need to be putting a lot of our resources into making sure that our families, our working class families that work here, are essential workers who we allowed, especially during the pandemic, who are holding up this city in every way, are actually able to afford to live here and to call it home, whether as renters or as homeowners. More than half of our rent burdened families could be homeowners if they had access to the right resources, right? Affordable, sustainable mortgages, and affordable home ownership opportunities. And so I want to see more of the city's budget, more of the city's resources going towards helping first generation home ownership, changing the face of home ownership here in our city to make it more accessible and more affordable with the right mortgage products. So also partnering to expand upon existing programs with banks, but also being more judicious with how we use city land. We have a lot of city land that we aren't using to the best of its ability. Now, I don't believe every nook and cranny needs to be developed for affordable housing or an affordable home ownership, especially when we're talking about the climate crisis that is at our doorstep. We need to be very thoughtful about carving out green space and building out our tree canopy, and using city land to build out affordable home ownership opportunity. Oftentimes the most expensive thing in the process is the land. And if the city owns the land, that goes a long way in reducing the cost barrier for first time and first generation homeowners.
How do you feel about rent control? Incoming Mayor Wu, or Mayor-elect Wu, has said that she thinks that's part of the solution when it comes to making Boston more affordable. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I also think that it's part of the solution. What we see is skyrocketing rents that are just not attainable for our working class families. And so, you get people getting pushed out of the city. So everything, including rent stabilization methods, have to be on the table in partnership with working with the State House to making that happen. But there's no, housing is a really big issue. So I've worked on it, both representing people facing eviction and foreclosure in housing court, and also, my work as a member and activist with the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance. There's no one silver bullet that's going to magically make everything more affordable. But we need to make sure that we are using everything in our toolkit. So that's using our resources, looking at our inclusionary development policy, looking at our linkage fees that we charge commercial developers to see how we can get more money into the neighborhood housing trust. It's looking at rent stabilization. It's all of those things. It's looking at community land trust to look at alternative models of renting and home ownership. We need to bring all of that to bear to solve for the affordability and supply crisis, right? We need to be building more, period. And so, yes, everything needs to be on the table.
Erin Murphy, you have talked about having a family member, one of your sons, in recovery.
Yes.
I'd love to hear more from you about how his experience and your experience with him has shaped the way you think about what's happening at Mass and Cass, and what you would like to see taking place in that neighborhood and involving the issues at play in that neighborhood moving forward.
Absolutely. So my son was on Long Island in October of 2014, and I got a call in the middle of the night that he was in a cab from him. And those who have any loved ones or have been through recovery, you know that you don't have access to a phone if you're in detox. So I knew something was wrong, but did not believe that the city had shut down the bridge. And then come to find out quickly that it had happened. So he came home, and many that night did not find their way to a safe place, found their way, so it didn't work out. But my son was lucky and found his way to the Gavin house and had a second chance at recovery. So I have been down at Mass and Cass and working with the Office of Recovery Services and the Gavin Foundation closely since October of 2014 when the bridge closed. Not just now during this campaign, because it's an issue that we're talking about during an election. Also, knowing that, the Gavin Foundation is such a wonderful resource in the city, but I, as a parent who needed to find resources for my loved one, was not able to, and spent many years feeling like there was a revolving door. And even though I knew there were resources out there, we'd be in and out of emergency rooms or not getting the right resources. So one of the things I wanted to make sure, once I found out who to call and how to get the help that so many need, is that I wanted to be that voice for so many others. So the Gavin Foundation was a lifesaver for me and my family. So I did run the marathon. I'm not a runner, but I know that people get marathon numbers to raise money for great organizations. So I trained through the coldest winter. If anyone remembers the winter of 2015, there was a lot of snow.
I don't want to think about that winter. Yeah, let's not talk about that.
But that was when I trained at 45 years old for my first marathon. I had never really run more than a mile. So I just kept showing up and working hard and knowing that as I shared my story and opened up to so many people, finding out it's so many in every neighborhood and so many families struggle with this. So I was a resource to them, and that's what kept me going and helping. I raised over $50,000 for the Gavin Foundation.
So let me ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask you, if Mayor-elect Wu were to come to you and say, Erin, you've lived with this and you've been focused on it for years. Tell me one thing that I should do once I become mayor to make that situation better quickly. What would you tell her?
I think down at Mass and Cass, or in general, I think it's making sure that we have recovery on demand for those who are ready for it, and making sure that the resources aren't hidden. The one thing I know, living through it and also helping so many others, is that the isolation that so many feel and the shame is what keeps people away from the resources. We're such a rich city, and there are people, if you're down at Mass and Cass, you see there are amazing social workers and so many people down there helping. So it's not that we don't have resources out there, it's that not everyone is connected to them. So making sure that we're opening up that communication and really working at stopping that stigma associated with it. So as a counselor, it would be my responsibility in a city to make sure that we're going out to the neighborhoods and we're meeting the people, because we know that people don't know where to turn or don't feel comfortable doing that. So that's something absolutely I would say to her.
I am going to have to try to hit both of you up for your thoughts on schools another time, because we've only got about a minute and a half left, and that's on me. I wanted to ask you in that minute and a half left, obviously you've got some other new counselors coming in. I want to make sure that I don't miss anyone. Kendra Hicks, Tonya Fernandez Anderson, Brian Worrell. The council has gotten, to my eye, more muscular vis-a-vis the mayor in recent years. I'm curious about what you think the council-mayor dynamic is going to be when you and your new colleagues, join the people who are already there, and Michelle Wu becomes mayor. Ruthzee, let's start with you.
Thanks, Adam. That's a great question. My hope is that it's a really strong relationship, right? Because I hope that everyone's goal here is to just build a better city. work towards a better Boston. And if that is everyone's goal, then we will work well together. It's about power sharing power, not just between City Hall, not just between the mayor and the city councilors and the new voices, but also with the people, which is what's so exciting about the budget question one, because it's about power sharing and all of us coming to the table to decide how we're spending our city resources. And I have great confidence that Michelle Wu, Madame Mayor-elect, is going to do a great job at listening to city councilors, because she herself was a city councilor prior to the city councilor at large, and listening to the people, because at the end of the day, you need to have a government that works for people. And
Erin Murphy, I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to squeeze Erin in here. I apologize.
It definitely
That's okay,
reminds
Erin,
me,
what do
I
you see?
always
And you've
say
got
that-
about 10
Yeah.
seconds, literally.
10 seconds. That if we're in it for the right reasons and we care about the city and connecting with the people, I always said if the teachers are at the table caring about the students, then we're going to make good decisions. So
Got it.
working together, which I'm confident we can do, and moving forward to make the city work for everyone. So I'm excited for those relationships I'm ready to form right now.
All right, Erin Murphy, Ruthzee, Louijeune, thank you again, and congratulations once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Adam.
That's going to do it for tonight. We will be back next week. For now, thank you for watching, and good night.